It's the Down Beach Buzz podcast for January 23, 2026. It's all sponsored by Sherry Lilienfeld of VXP Realty. Buy, sell, commercial, residential. Check her out. Go to realtysherry.com. The podcast also powered by Paul Scollage and Rate.com. He's the Senior VP of Lending at Rate.com. Mortgages, cash outs, refis. Paul is the man. Reach out to him at Rate.com. Today, a very special guest on the Down Beach Buzz podcast. Somebody pinch me. I can't believe we're doing it, but he's the best at describing and discussing these issues. A special guest. We're honored to have the Margate City Solicitor, John Scott Abbott, on the podcast to discuss some things that are near and dear to his heart. I mean, 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears. Well, maybe no blood, but there's probably sweat and some tears maybe. Finally, we got some citywide permitting for dredging in the city of Margate. A few weeks back, I was watching the commission meeting. Solicitor Abbott, it was a dredging update with Ed Dennis, the engineer, and Mr. Abbott mentioned his sneaking suspicion that maybe the front beach replenishment might be a likely contributor to clogged waterways and channels and back base silting. And, boats having a tough time navigating during low tide, sometimes dangerous. Maybe it could affect the property values. Amherst, Jerome Avenue, even the popular water park affected by this silting. So Scott Abbott, thanks for being here on the Down Beach Buzz podcast. Give us the 30,000-foot view of the issue at hand right now.
Well, I thank you for having me here. And I go by Scott. Just call me Scott. So I've been the Margate City Solicitor for 15 years, going on 16. And I've always been a bay guy. I've always had a boat. I've always lived on the water. And our back bays between Margate as well as Ventnor and Longport have really clogged up. We have not had maintenance dredging. We haven't had maintenance dredging on the inland waterway in many, many decades. And so Mayor Becker at that time allowed me to go forward and push to try to get a dredging permit for the city. And I can tell you at the beginning, we went to Trenton to meet with the DEP officials. And from the very get-go, they did not like the idea. They said we would be destroying marine habitat, destroying clams. I went to, I'd say at least 6 meetings, maybe more in Trenton, trying to find a way to get around these restrictions based primarily on marine habitat, shellfish habitat, that they did not want dredging. They didn't want to allow dredging anywhere. It was kind of even the lagoons, or their technical names are Orient Canal and Sunset Canal. They didn't want dredging. So I had the benefit of 2 individuals who've helped me in many of these riparian issues and DEP issues. One was Stu Farrell, Dr. Farrell of the Coastal Resource Institute out at Stockton. Stu's retired now, but he is the acknowledged expert on these type of issues. And the late Senator Jim Whalen, who was also tremendous help on this. To give you an idea, John and Sherry, when we first started, the DEP said outright, no, we're not giving you a permit. We're not going to let you dredge. That mound in front of the log cabin, that area in front of those lagoons, there's too many clams. I said, well, they're in considered polluted waters because of street water runoff, and you're not even allowed to transport those clams. Sometimes you can transport clams from different areas, but not there. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why are we so concerned about polluted clams that nobody should eat? So just to check it out to see if there were clams, I went out there one time at a clam break. I used to do some clamming. It was loaded with clams. There's a lot of clams. So after one of these very disappointing meetings in Trent with the DEP, we drove home, and I went to Stu and I said, what can we do? He says, the only thing you can do is change the law. Well, you know what? We might be able to do that. I said, Jimmy Whalen and I were Atlantic City lifeguards together, and I was his planning board lawyer during the time that he was his mayor of Atlantic City. So I asked Stu to draw up something that we thought would pass. We went to the Senator Whalen and said, look, we've got a real problem here. DEP shutting us out. They won't even consider letting us dredge. We need your help. Jimmy also lived on the bay at that time. I live on the bay in Margate. Jimmy lived next to the Albany Avenue Bridge. He's very familiar with the bay, having swam around the island a number of times. He knew the waters well. We put together legislation. Primarily, the basic point was that we could dredge out channels and docks a radius of 250 feet from man-made structures like a dock. So, for instance, if you have a dock, from the end of your dock out to 250 feet, you can dredge. And that's very useful, particularly along Jerome Avenue for Margate. We had to go to a series of meetings with subcommittees and committees, and we drive up to Trenton, and we take Stu, and take Senator Whalen, and the assistant DEP commissioner was there to oppose us with her staff. She didn't like the idea. And I'm sitting there, and I guess I looked pretty worried. There were 4 assemblymen up there, very dapper, extremely dapper, and they were from North Jersey. They take a break. The guy says to me, "Come here." Yes, sir. How can I? What? He goes, "You look kind of worried." I said, "Do I have a reason to be worried?" He goes, "Look, we're all from Essex and Bergen County. That's true. But we all have summer homes in Long Beach Island, and we know what you're trying to do. You don't have a problem." Damn. So there we are. And sure enough, that law, and I gave Sherry a copy of that law, and that law allows us to dredge. We're going to try to create a channel from Nassau Avenue around to the bridge, Margate Bridge. And we also want to dredge the 3 lagoons, and we want to see the areas dredged down by our marina district. So we got that legislation passed, and that was an enormous benefit, not just for Margate. That benefited a lot of shore towns because this DEP hurdle stopped a lot of dredging. Now, as we progressed with the permit, the next big issue is what do you do? What do you propose to do with your dredge material? The first concept was there's a cut across from Lombardi's, across from what used to be Captain Andy's. Anybody who's a boater knows that cut. Man-made, 1940. They were building Navy vessels for the war, and they dredged that channel, that cut out. But through the years, it had filled in so that even at mid-tide, a boat of any size couldn't get through there. Our initial proposal was to fill in dredge material there and then reconstruct wetlands. As you're probably aware, our wetlands are very vital to the welfare of the ocean. And we thought we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We'll move our dredge material. It'll be a cheap way to do it. Yes, it's right across from those docks you have on the screen there. Absolutely not. No, you can't put it there. Why not? Well, you'll destroy marine habitat. Well, marine habitat was Spartina altiflora. The wetlands were destroyed when they dredged this. Can't do that. Find another spot. Okay, how about Dog Beach, Malibu Beach, the beach that runs into the north end of Ocean City? Severe erosion there. Sometimes when there's a storm, there's waves breaking on that road. A logical solution, put our dredge material, which is primarily sand. It's well over 90% sand. No, we can't let you do that. You're not allowed to do that. And that would have been a nice, easy, relatively cheap fix because hydraulically you could move your dredge material. Well, as I was researching this, I found that in Barnegat Bay, the Army Corps had used what's called a dredge hole. That all these barrier islands had massive amounts of dredging in the 1880s, 90s, 1900s, 1920s. When you look at Ventnor Heights or Chelsea Heights, that was all wetlands. That was all filled in. When you look, if you ever been to Maynard's, I imagine you have, John. I know I have been. In 1920, if you stepped out of the door at Maynard's, you'd be stepping into the bay. That was all filled in. The city got riparian grants, deeds from the state, filled in, built a bulkhead there, put Amherst Avenue in there. This happened everywhere. Massive, a lot of it. Ocean City, Avalon, Atlantic City, Ventnor, Brigantine, and us. Now, with that background, where did they get the material to do that? Well, if you'll go up to the right there off of Chelsea, no, the other way, Chelsea Heights, there's a giant hole there that's 60 foot deep. 60 foot deep. I think the capacity is like 700,000 cubic yards, which is a tremendous capacity. Right there where your arrow is, very deep water. You know, you'll see guys striper fishing off the end of that dirt road. That's deep water if you have a depth finder. Bring it down to Shelter Island, if you would. Shelter Island was also used for material to build up the elevations of Ventnor West, Upper Margate, Douglas Avenue area. That is Shelter Island. I think now, can you go down a little bit? Let me see if that's the full picture. Yeah, there it is. That hole, this area in the center, is about 4.5 acres. It's 28 foot deep. That is dredge hole 86. That's where Margate wants to put its dredge material, if possible. If we can do it hydraulically by pipe, it's cheaper than trucking it out. But if we could use this dredge hole, and if anybody, again, I was, as a kid, that green area, that was the Margate and Ventnor sewer plant. So when we would water ski by there, you could see gray water coming up with toilet paper. You really tried hard not to fall off your skis if you were going by there. But that is where Ventnor owned it. And in 1933, Margate bought half of that island from Ventnor, and they operated a joint sewer plant. But in 1920, I have an aerial picture that shows a dredge running a barge about a half a mile. Funny enough, Doc Holland, if you know who Dr. Holland was at the Viking Rowing Club, told me the story that his father ran that dredge barge for years. And in the wintertime, they used to tie it up across from the Ventnor Waterworks. And they would dredge all along Margate, Longport, Atlantic City. So even in front of Shelter Island, going towards Fredericksburg Avenue, there's holes there too. But the hole we want, that we own, that was upland originally, is Shelter Island. We need it. Ventnor needs it. Why would you not let us use it? Well, we have to save that for the inland waterway. He said, for 700,000 cubic yards, you won't fill that up in 200 years. And I don't know if I'm jumping around here too much. That big mound in front of the log cabin, we could never afford to eliminate that. It's just too much material. It would cost millions of dollars, but we can build a channel. So bottom line, we're not yet permitted to use Shelter Island. And I really had hoped they would let us do it because erosion of our salt marshes is such a critical issue. And here we are, we're working with Stockton's Coastal Research Center to do that and rebuild wetlands. But so far, the state hasn't allowed us to do that. Along there, as you go along Wellington Avenue and Jerome Avenue, our permit is to allow a channel there. And that channel, that permit goes out about 250 feet. And then what you have to do is slope your sides. We're going to have it dredged down to 5 feet below mean low water. When they first gave us our permit, they made a mistake and said 4 feet. No, we wanted the 5. So we're allowed to dredge legally to 5 foot below the lowest tide. So our dredge permit, which also had to get Army Corps permit as well as DEP, is for, it says 5 years, but there's a clause in there that gives us another 5. It's for 10 years, and it covers from Longport to Ventnor. It covers all of our 3 lagoons, our marinas. And lo and behold, while this was going on, Scarborough came in and bought what we knew as the Swift Marina. Back in the day, it was a Holiday Marina, I think, and it was located there along Jerome Avenue. And Sean came to the city. Sean Scarborough owns a company. Scarborough's own marinas up and down the South Jersey coast. And they got into the dredging business to be able to service and maintain their marinas. So he bought Swift's Marina, and he, under our permit, our citywide permit, solely at his expense, he's currently dredging out that ground. In fact, they're almost done. It goes very quickly. So here's a picture I took yesterday. That's some of his equipment. And you see the long arm there, that green arm. They dig it up. They fill in. If you can see that, you see the tires hanging on there. They've got these little barges. He had those special built in Indiana. They're 6 foot in depth, and they have a capacity. I forget what he said his capacity is, but his trucks have 18 cubic yard capacity. He only fills them to 15. Do you have the other picture there too that shows them putting it in the truck? That's it. That's it. Now, a few years back, Blue Water Marina across some memories, and then later the water park did this type of dredging where they came in, excavated the dredge material, and put it in trucks. And there was people were concerned, oh, they'll be spilling dredge material on the street, they'll be making a mess. Not a drop, nothing. They take that mud, pull it out of the barge, put it in the truck. When the truck's filled to 15 cubic yards, off he goes. And they dump it. I think they're putting it at Saran's right now. They're driving it out. It's a shame because it's more money to put it in a truck and drive it out that far. It would be cheaper if we could do it hydraulically, or he could do it hydraulically. But like I say, we don't have that permission yet from the DEP. We can't use hole 86. That's what it's referred to. Hole 90 is our shelter island. They haven't given us a permit, and that's been pending for a number of years. But that's where we are. So Scarborough will be done with this very shortly.
Sherry is just chomping at the
Go
bit.
ahead, Sherry.
She's got some good questions for you.
Go ahead. Hit me with the question.
Although this is an environmental project, it is about protecting homes, reducing risk, and preserving our property values, and also making it safer for the boaters. When you do the dredging, will we see less street flooding and flooding around our homes? Like, how would it affect us on the island? We know how it affects the boaters and being able to get in and out. What can we expect to see?
I'm told it does help, Sherry. I'm told that it does help drainage if these areas are deeper and clearer. I'll admit to being a little bit skeptical. I mean, the ocean's the ocean, but this is a thimble compared to how big the ocean is. But it certainly helps if your drainage pipes are inundated or half fill, or the silt or the mud's coming up. So clearly that is a benefit. You're probably aware now, Margate has a big drainage project going on Amherst Avenue, where they're putting in underground pumps so that when we get a flood, now you're not going to be able to stop flooding, but they'll be able to get the water out even though it's high tide, because the pressure of a pump can blow it out. And of course you need open water on the other side of that to accept that water. So, and that will help Amherst Avenue a lot. Their biggest problem is they'll have water, and guys will drive their trucks down the road throwing off a wake, and that wake will throw water into their establishments. So yes, I think it does tend to help our drainage problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to think, obviously, if there's a bigger bucket, i.e. deeper, water, you dredge for this water to go. And then with that pump project, that it would definitely help, the property.
Well, clearly safety too, Sherry. Do you remember some years back, a local realtor and his brother were fishing, and they were coming back from a day fishing behind Ventnor, and they ran aground in an area that at one time was pretty deep water. And the brother went forward and split his head open on an anchor and died. And often I've seen boats run aground either in that cut across from Lamberti's or at the end of where my lagoon is. And by the way, I only have a 20-foot boat and I got plenty of water in my lagoon, so it's not benefiting me personally. Some people say that. But I do want to see this area dredged, including the lagoon I'm in, the little bit that it needs. But yeah, it's hazardous if people think the inland waterway is clear. They expect it to be clear. And quite frankly, our inland waterway in New Jersey has not been maintained the way it is in other states. Down in Florida, they do maintenance dredging all the time. And their inland waterway and their private canals, it's done. Here, it's a struggle.
Yeah, what people don't understand is when you do dredging properly, like you guys did a lot of testing, right? There was testing of sediment everywhere.
One of the tests, we couldn't find a laboratory in New Jersey to do the test. We had to go out west to have the test done. It's not like the Hudson River where there's contaminants from like GE plants and all that. if you've read about that, if you know what I'm talking about.
It's a big safety issue, and you guys
I
are
think so.
doing it correctly, and it restores natural tidal flow. It improves water quality, and actually, there's the benefit to the shellfish in long term.
Without having to deal with the shellfish habitat rules, which are very onerous.
But property owners will be able to utilize the permit.
That's why we pursued this citywide permit. And I think that's one of the reasons Scarborough probably bought that marina, so that he has an access point for his trucks. So for instance, I'll give you an example. So if you have a house inside the lagoon, it's called Orient Canal, and there's Sunset Canal. Those are the two names. And there's one over by Bayshore Drive too. Let's say you want to dredge, you and your neighbors want to dredge at your docks. Under our permit that we had issued, which we fought for, the entire city's covered. Your property's covered. You don't have to go get a separate DEP permit and the Army Corps permit and spend the thousands and thousands of dollars you have to spend to get that permit. It's been done. So now what Scarborough told me is he's done over 50 homes in Ocean City. And he's got the equipment. I mean, I've inspected all his equipment. I've known Sean, and he showed me, he knew of my interest and showed me what he was doing. He's got the correct barges, the correct equipment to dig it out. And now he has his own location, which there's no harm to our streets. There's no mess on our roads. And he is going to be pursuing dredging out individual homeowners, which is tremendous because some of these people, you know, look, they're big money. They pay a lot of taxes. And their boating areas, their dockage areas have silted up, and they can't bring in a boat. You know, they can't keep a boat there. So this is a huge benefit. I'm very glad Scarborough came along. And he did tell me he could give me a drone picture or like a video, which I think maybe we'll stick that on our Margate website just to see how it can be done. Because a lot of people are saying, well, how do I get my dock dredged out?
So you're saying Scarborough could maybe do this for property owners?
Or any other qualified dredger who's got the proper equipment. I mean, it isn't just Scarborough. I mean, but yes, he's here. He's got his equipment here, and he's a local guy.
We have a permit.
And we have
a permit.
We got two permits. We got an Army Corps and a DEP.
On the Down Beach Buzz podcast for January 23, 2026 with John Scott Abbott. We call him Scott. He's the solicitor for the city of Margate. We are celebrating the citywide permits from both the Army Corps and the DEP. We got a doubleheader here. Work has already started on some properties by Mr. Scarborough. That's the old Swift Marina, getting dredged out, really nicely done. A few years back, Governor Christie, the governor of New Jersey, and Mayor Michael Becker, mayor of Margate at that time, they butted heads a lot over the need for high dunes and massive outfall pipes. And most recently, the Fed has cut back on funding. Even the state, Governor Murphy said, nah, it doesn't really rise to the level of emergency to get your beaches renourished. Replenishment of beaches, the front beaches, might slow down a bit. Do you think that will benefit the Back Bay silting problem?
Well, as a boater, I can tell you, since they implemented beach replenishment on Absecon Island, our back bays have silted up. There are sandbars now on the inside of the Egg Harbor Inlet that were never there. Never had that. When you go and look at some of the docks along Longport, there's sand and shallowness there. They used to be deep water. No question in my mind, some of those particles have made their way and caused our problem. Where else is it coming from? Where else is all this material? It's coming from in front of the log cabin or going into our lagoons. It's not coming from Pleasantville or Linwood. Where could it? It's got to be coming from the beach replenishment. So in my view, I think the state should probably help us out with these dredging. They in part caused the problem. And yes, we did butt heads. Margate did not want to participate in the beach replenishment. We felt we didn't need to do that. And they forced us to do it. We fought them in state court, and then we had a big law firm representing us in federal court. And if you'll remember, we took the position that now all our street ends on the beach block, when they drain stormwater, the sand dunes, instead of allowing the water to go to the ocean, will block them, and we will have ponds. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. we'd have 2, 3, 4 foot of water there, and it would stay there for days. Apparently, the engineers for the Army Corps, the state, forgot there's a thing called groundwater. So the water wouldn't percolate down. So when we're in federal court, I'll tell you a funny story. It's kind of funny because all these people were walking through this water and they were getting hives. They're getting these red splotches all over their legs. Not a phony thing, legit. And the water's there was a hell of a problem. So I brought 3 lifeguards up from Margate, and the judge said, "No, that won't be necessary. You know, Your Honor, I brought them up 60 miles up to Camden Federal Courthouse. I really want you to take a look at these red splotches on their legs that these fellows are going to tell you they didn't have them until they started having to walk through that water to get their equipment, you know, the lifeguard oars and their buoys and all that to get it down to the water's edge." So the judge let us do it. But it was a problem. And finally, they stepped up, they being the state, and they implemented a drainage system. We now have these outfall pipes, which I'm not a fan of.
Yeah.
We have 5 of them, and the water drains into an underground system and then out these 5 pipes. $20 million that cost. Not by us, state and feds. But, you know, ironically, when Sandy hit, John, I believe, and my flood manager told me 95% of the flood insurance monies paid out was for properties on the bay side of Atlantic Avenue.
Yep.
The properties, I don't know if people realize this or not, Atlantic Avenue is where they put the railroad track because it was the highest ground. We had a railroad that ran all the way down into Longport. The homes on the beach block, for the most part, are on high ground, the highest ground on the island. And in addition to that, we have seawalls. So we have seawalls and bulkheads on the highest ground. 95% of our damage and flood payout, insurance monies was from the bay side. But Governor Christie said one size fits all. We're going to have sand dunes in Margate, and that's how it was ordered, and we had to have it. We didn't want to participate in that.
Is that 50-year deal from Governor Christie, is that still in effect?
That's a 50-year deal. It's a signed deal. I'm absolutely convinced that those sand dunes have destroyed or significantly harmed the Atlantic City boardwalk. I'm a Atlantic City guy, went to Atlantic High, I was Atlantic City lifeguard. You can't see the ocean. You can't see bathers. What's the purpose of the boardwalk? Now, one other great point. When Ocean City first started beach replenishment and they put in their dunes, because they started it, they kept the elevation of their dune lower so that when you're on the Ocean City boardwalk, notice it next time. So you people, you take your grandkids over there for the remaining rides that are there. But if you go over, you can still see the water's edge. You can see the Atlantic Ocean, which is the whole purpose of the boardwalk. So Ocean City was pretty smart. They set their own elevation. But then when they forced it down on us, the state, and of course, Atlantic City's is 2 foot higher than Down Beach. Now, in the more recent agreements, the cities like Ventnor are allowed to trim that height of that dune. And look, I will admit this. I believe that the sand dunes in Ventnor and Lower Atlantic City saved that boardwalk in Hurricane Sandy.
You said Ventnor can trim their dunes?
That's my understanding. That's in that agreement, that there's a right. But that's very expensive. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to.
New York City is going to have some casino gaming real soon, and even North Jersey casinos, they're coming. But we got something that nobody else has. We have the beach and the boardwalk. It's too bad you can't see the beach and the boardwalk. That unique selling proposition is gone. Do they kind of forget that?
John, miracles never cease to amaze me. You and I are on the same page on this, 100%. And if you remember the late Pinky Kravitz, that was his pet peeve. He thought that the dunes should be lowered and they should be maybe perhaps wider, but not as high up, so that you preserve the aesthetics and you can see, not just visual, but even safety. I will tell you through my years, and I'm aware of this, that people on the boardwalk have made rescues of people drowning because they could see somebody in trouble, maybe at 7 o'clock at night in the summer or something. Many times that has happened. Now that's impossible because you can't see it. Very hard to hear it too. You're not going to hear them yelling. So
Is it possible that there was an entity that got paid by the cubic yards pumped onto the beach, so they were encouraged to make the dunes as big as possible?
Politics at play. That's always possible in New Jersey, John. I'm not going to say it's impossible. After Hurricane Sandy and Christie with his advisors, they felt the only way to deal with this is to put up the sand dunes.
Yeah.
But again, like I say, 95% of the insurance monies paid out were on the bay side, not the ocean side. So, but I do agree. Ironically, when I was a little boy, my mother and stepfather were living in the Ventnor Motel top floor when the March storm of 62 hit. And I was in 5th grade. And I watched the Ventnor boardwalk get destroyed by waves. And the fact is, my stepfather was a doctor. His hobby was photography, and he took a film of it and a video. Stu, actually, I've seen it on TV, that there's a film showing all this destruction from the March storm of 62, which Hal Cook photographed. And there's also a picture of a little kid, me, running around the busted up boardwalk. And what happened, John, is when the waves would come in, they'd hit that seawall and come back, and then the next wave would hit, and like a geyser, and then the boardwalk, you could actually see it, and eventually, just like a garden hose, if you flip the garden hose, the whole damn boardwalk from Dudley Avenue down to the pier went up, over, and destroyed. And the whole boardwalk was destroyed. But thank God Ventnor rebuilt that boardwalk, because that's a tremendous asset. Check this out. I always love showing this. I don't know if it'll show up. I hope it does. This is an aerial picture called a Fairchild picture. He was an inventor. He worked for during World War I to invent bombing photography. The state didn't know these photographs existed until about 15 years ago, and they found it. And if you can see it, this is Margate. It's all dug out, all dug out. There's the mouth of a creek that ran up. This white is dredge material. That was sand from dredging. And they filled in all these wetlands. See here, that's wetlands. That's sand from the bay. Here's Amherst Avenue. That's Washington Avenue in 1920. You can't really see it here, but if you go on the website, if people want to find these, just plug in, I think you can do it this way, Fairchild aerial photography. This man worked for the military. It was Stu Farrell had somebody contact him. They found a file of him in Vicksburg, Mississippi. The guy said, would you be interested in having these photos of the Jersey coastline in 1920? High quality. And it'll really show you. Look at Longport. That's Longport. That's all wetlands. That's a creek running through Longport. So, yes, our island was no stranger to dredging. It was massive. Brigantine was a series of small islands. Atlantic City, Gardner's Basin, Snug Harbor, it's all dredged out. So, guys, I enjoy doing this.
Make sure, Scott, that you thank Mayor Collins and Roger McLarnon, Pat Moran, Ed Dennis, the engineer, and Mr. Scarborough. You got a great team. Got the right people in place.
Look, these bayfront people and people use boats, and that's why Scott's Docks was so important to try to help him. He's the last marina where you can buy bait or rent a boat. And that kid, he needs our support, because once he's gone, we won't. When I was a kid, we had about 6 or 8 marinas. They're all gone. You know, big money on the water. They sell out.
Robin Scott is looking down from above, and she's happy, I think.
I went to high school with Robin. I know, very friendly with her.
Yeah, we miss her big time.
Oh, yeah. I miss Robin. We graduated together, Atlantic High.
Really?
And
wow.
But her son is carrying on, and from what I hear, he's doing pretty well. And so if a normal, regular person who doesn't own a 50-foot Hatteras wants to take his grandson out fishing, and go to Scott's Docks and take him out fishing. His grandfather started after World War II. There was Scott's Docks, there was Haynes, there was Spalding's, there was Captain Annie's, there was, I don't know what it was called back then, but Angler's Roost eventually. I was a dock boy for Ralph Stork and Captain Annie's when I was 15. But they were great times. It was,
We love the new Amherst Avenue, but we certainly kind of remember the good old days of the old, almost like saltwater, dilapidated Amherst waterfront. That was still a lot of fun too.
it was a very unique place. It's still very unique.
Yeah.
And of course, Margate now, I mean, I know we have some issues with noise, but look at the fantastic restaurants that nobody can match what we have in Margate. You think about that: Stephen Cookies, Sophia's, Tomatoes, Lombardi's, what is it, Tide Lines, all those places. It's really fantastic. And yeah, there's some growing pains perhaps, and we're working on the parking issue and whatnot. But the city is moving forward, and there are many, many hundreds of people whose livelihoods depend on the success of those places. So it isn't, it isn't just all about, wealthy homes. There's a lot more involved with it. So guys, anytime you want me to talk on this or history, I got a lot on the history of this island, and down here in Margate, I've done a lot of research, and it's a hobby of love. I enjoy doing it.